Hi team, so day 5, part 2 of the mini-series, but day 5 of the 12-day series. So welcome back to the Identity Human podcast. And today myself and Ray talk about an element of emotional mastery. And what does that actually mean? So it's really around the feelings of something we've gone through, whether you're practicing them because you're aware of what they are, or if you've gone through something and you didn't even realize that you've gained mastery of it because you've gone through it. So it's where we look into no one can take away how you feel about your story. And knowing that that's okay and gaining experience and knowledge from there and then being able to pair it outwards. So if you take a listen to today's episode, it's really going to help you start to layer up really nicely this aspect of mastery on all 4 levels and where you can take it to help build up your thoughts and your mind, as well as to make sure that you're taking in the right level of knowledge or perspective or opinions, because we don't want to end up with having accidental mentors. Okay, we'll get on to that another time. Right, well, enjoy the episode. So, welcome back to another episode of Identity Human podcast with Don and
Ray.
And we are, yes, here we are. I would have said jinx, but I'm not going to do that on the podcast. That'd be mean. So we're doing the 12 days of Christmas. Last week we did the last episode yesterday. Sorry, we are pre-recording this, so we're not as efficient as everyone thinks by sending this out an hour later. So we talked about cognitive mastery in the previous episode, and today we're going to do the next concept, which is emotional mastery. So Ray, do you want to give me an understanding of emotional mastery? Because we've had a brief conversation.
I feel like, Don, you're putting me on the spot here because I was not arguing with you. I was trying to understand where emotional mastery fits. Because I feel like there's a lot of overlap, and I feel like I was even getting confused because we have spoken about in the previous episode that there's cognitive mastery, emotional mastery, and physical mastery, and then there's a 4th point that you need to make sure you pull into that, which is reflection. Okay, and I was just feeling a bit confused because these 4 concepts are very much Don concepts. Some of the other episodes in these 12 days of Christmas are concepts that I brought forward. So this is very much Don is the lead on understanding these. So that's why I'm not as confident around them. And I was just trying to understand where emotional mastery fits versus reflections.
Okay.
So to answer your question, Don, around what is emotional mastery, I think what really helped me to understand it when we've spoken about this before is actually not seeing the different types of masteries as levels, but as distinct things that you can achieve, so that you can achieve emotional mastery of something without having cognitive mastery. And so when you look at it like that, emotional mastery, it could be that you've gone through an experience and you've been able to overcome it from the emotional side because you've learned how to work through those emotions, how to deal with that experience or that thing from an emotional point of view, but you may not have any of the cognitive mastery.
So I was going to ask you to define
that's
emotional
how
mastery.
That's my best way of defining it, is that it's your emotional
It's the feeling
response.
you've got of
It's your
something.
feelings that you've got.
Because if you want to compare that to cognitive mastery, you can read about, say, a good topic is depression. You can read about depression and think you understand, you can understand how the brain works, but unless you've been depressed, it's very hard for you to really know how hard it is to do something when you're depressed.
Or someone could have had depression and worked through it with a therapist or something, and therefore they don't necessarily have any cognitive mastery because they don't understand the inner workings of depression, but they've been able to overcome it and they know how it feels for them and how to work through it. So I suppose emotional mastery is a very personal thing, whereas cognitive mastery is like there's knowledge out there. Emotional mastery is how does that experience feel for you? And
we'll often learn something and not realize that we've been through it because we think it's completely different. So the point of putting this in is sometimes you need to reflect on what you know and realize how it fits into what you've been through to pair in the cognitive and the emotions. So for example, with rugby, like I've not looked at the emotional mastery of what I've got through that. So when we're doing Unshakable, I'm trying to give as much, there's cognitive mastery because of the knowledge of the books and all that kind of stuff. And I've linked a couple of things in, but I've never really backed the emotional mastery of what I've gone through. Whereas when I saw this, I was like, okay, the emotions of high performance, I really have done that. So I can lean on, actually, that bit of cognitive mastery is a bit of nonsense, because I know that in play, it doesn't work out like that. So you'll often see someone that'll come and be a high performance coach that has learned all about it, but hasn't got any high performance experience themselves.
Okay, yeah.
So they will be telling you to do things that they've never done before because the books say it,
Well,
but it doesn't work in practice.
Great example I've heard you say, I think it was either your physio or your fitness coach at when you play professional rugby, would make you do, would get you to do exercises, and I can't remember how it played out, but basically they said to you, I would never get you to do any
let me tell the story.
Okay.
You just made it like it was back in 19 Nam. No, it was in my first year of Stormers, and there was a guy called
Stormers
Steph.
is a professional rugby side in South Africa. Yes.
Steph du Toit was his name, and we were in pre-season, and he was very much, he just planned it so well. And there was like third week in the pre-season on a Tuesday.
Because you could get like SNCs that they call.
Yeah, that have never.
You could get coaches who've just got those fitness coaches who've just gone to university or gone and they've studied and they know their stuff.
Gymmed. So there's a good example. They've gymmed and they've set the program, but they haven't gymmed and run. And they've just set out because they know, I've read your heart rates and I know that you can.
Yeah, they approach it from a cognitive point of view.
And Steph, it was like on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, he says, boys, outside, it's just a gym session there. Because you used to run on a Monday, do gym. Tuesday was just gym. Mm-hmm. And so you would come in early, leave. And he starts to do these running exercises. I've never done them before, but they're called A skips. So he starts these A skips where it's like what you see sprinters do, and you've got to really drive your legs up. And he shows us what to do. So I start doing it. And as I do it, I'm like, oh, my hamstrings are stiff. But I think this. And within 10 seconds, he says, oh, boys, by the way, your hamstrings are probably going to be stiff. And I turned to him and I was like, Steph, how the hell did you know that my hamstrings are stiff? Because that's spot on. He says, because I did the session yesterday and I know I would never make you do something that I haven't done. And that stuck with me forever because he knows he's getting us to do stuff. He knows what we feel. So he knows how to push us. But then he also, because he's got the mastery, he knows when someone's shirking. That's what I love about it, is he knows what you have to go through to do it.
Because he's actually
experienced it. So instead of him just saying do A skips, he's like do A skips, but if you've got stiff hamstrings, then probably just ease off. So it's like this extra layer that it adds.
And so amazing and fascinating that people maybe don't think about that layer. People focus on the cognitive mastery and the physical mastery.
Because that's what social media currently is feeding us. So.
And the emotional is just really that experience and that feeling. I know his was like a muscle thing, so you could argue kind of overlaps with physical mastery, but that's where I still battle to distinguish emotional. It feels like it grays or overlaps with the others. But so I would like, if someone's listening to this episode and they are like, right, well, what is this? This is all interesting stories, but how do I practically use this? How do I use this knowledge that I should be building emotional mastery alongside physical and cognitive?
So, for one, it helps you build your confidence because you can understand something, and if you can relate it to something that's been through in your life, then you understand the feeling. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So you can use a different example. Parents or people that have never been parents telling you how to parent because they know human behavior, but they've never been awake at 5 a.m. for the 16th week in a row trying to apply the same principles that they say do on day one, and then they say you're doing a bad job because you're not applying it.
Well, and the parenting's actually given me the idea of where emotional fits in. So,
okay, I got to do this quick because the video keeps pausing. If you are ahead of the game and the challenge isn't what you're after, then what about someone that you know that might benefit from it? Remember, we've set this up to be as minimal, as easily accessible to anyone and everyone. They don't need anything. And yeah, there's not much of a time commitment, really. There goes the video. So if you're listening to this and you enjoy it and you're enjoying our series and you haven't done a challenge before, go to www.identityhuman.com and sign up for the challenge. Remember, it's free, starts on the 2nd of January. And if you have done it before, come and join us again and bring your energy. All right? Enjoy the rest of the episode.
There's obviously, you got your knowledge or your cognitive mastery of like maybe how to parent.
You've read a book.
You've got your physical mastery where you're actually in the thick of it, you're parenting your kids. But how often, so you might have read books or listened to podcast episodes on how to do it, and then you're physically doing it with your kids, like, disciplining them in a certain way or acting in a certain way. But then we all do it. We sometimes think back to, oh I remember when I was a kid and how when my parents said that to me, it made me feel. And you reflect on, well, when I was treated that way, that was like my emotional experience of that. And so pulling that in addition to your experience, actually adds another layer to how you approach something.
Creates a more masterful experience.
Yes.
So when you're communicating with your kids and you're trying to do it in a calm way, you realize that because when you were a kid and you got shouted at, it actually made you do it out of fear, which made you more anxious. So you didn't want to create that emotion in the kid. So there we go. I think we've given some some parenting examples. Business examples would be you're taking advice from someone that's got an MBA but has never actually grown a business or failed in a business, to be able to know, oh, by the way, do these 4 meetings, and by the 5th one you might. So how would you know someone's got mastery in business? Is because they go, do these 4 meetings. By the 5th meeting, you'll have drop off. And if you've got drop off, you need to interact with that person, and then do this, and that'll reignite it. And then what actually happens is by the 5th meeting, it's exactly as it is, as opposed to someone says, oh, do the 4 meetings and it's all going to work out.
Or I can think of another example, like around cash flow forecasting, and say your business is going through a really tight time where cash is tight. Someone could have learned have the knowledge around how to deal with that, and the practical experience if they've maybe helped other businesses doing it, but until they have experienced it themselves, and that pressure of how you make decisions when you're in a certain emotional state, having that emotional experience gives like a completely different layer to how you're able to help people and your mastery of that topic.
Yeah. And I suppose if you would take parenting advice from someone that's had 4 kids, because you got 4 kids, they're going to have probably a more personal understanding of what 4 kids is like, as opposed to taking parenting advice from someone that's had 3 kids. Even though you're both parents, they've never experienced what it's like to juggle a 4th kid.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's just understanding for yourself. So just to summarize, for yourself, where have you got emotional mastery that you haven't recognized that you have it because you think it doesn't matter?
So that's what I was thinking too. It's like we probably don't recognize our emotional mastery enough, and it kind of can lean on it, and it can help feed
authenticity.
I was going to say, even like that imposter syndrome where you're like, what do I bring that's different? How do I actually really understand this? It can help to be like, do you know what? I don't just understand this, and I haven't just done it, but I actually know how it feels.
Yeah.
And so maybe, because the more we talk about it, the more we like, yes, I have experienced this emotionally there. So like it might be really good for people to like actually
back themselves
and think about where they've got that.
And then the other bit that we wrap it in is, if you're in a place and you're trying to take advice from people, you can use these concepts to know, do I trust them fully, or do I just take on some of their knowledge because it sounds good? So for example, if you're taking high performance advice from someone that's never been in a high performance environment, chances are they lack the emotional mastery, and it's a big one. It really is a big one. So it just means, there are some scientists that can give you such good insight into the mind, but remember that they don't have the context of how that actually applies on the field. And so if you can find someone that can do that on a holistic point of view, even if they're not as technically minded, they're going to give you a better understanding of, oh, by the way, I know what happens in the 79th minute. And when it gets there, don't worry about it. You will be fine. It's going to give you more knowledge than like the technician that tells you, oh, this will be fine. And then you say, but what about the 79th minute? They're like, this should work. That's not going to give you much better.
So what is something, if someone who's listening to this episode, what's something that they could do today to help them set them up for a good 2025 with this new nugget of information?
But I suppose it depends what they're trying to achieve, where they're trying to go and what they're trying to do with it. But if you're someone that's read the books and you're not sure if those books actually apply, try and apply what you've learned from your experiences. And if you are always looking forward, if you're someone that only looks forward, try and really look at what you've gone through to realize where you have experience in something that you're trying to achieve or create mastery of.
So is today's challenge a bit of a journal prompt?
A journal prompt, for example, let's say if you want to know yourself and become like self-mastery, you have to read some books about personality, but you also have to understand what makes you feel powerful, what doesn't, and look back at different times in your past where you've gone, actually, that's really made me feel good. And then start to be more aware of it in the present. Like, when you're reading a book versus watching a movie, and maybe that's a bad example. When you're talking to one person or talking to 5 people or talking to 15 people, what makes you feel good? When you're talking about people versus analytics, which one makes you feel better? So I suppose the challenge is start to become aware of the feelings of your experiences, both current and past, because those feelings are going to give you deeper insight to tie in with the knowledge that you've got. So if you want, I suppose, what is the actual challenge? Because I can say awareness.
And what's that practical to take them forward for 2025?
I genuinely, it has to be tell someone, maybe a challenge this, tell someone or ask your parent or someone that knows you a few stories about what's happened in your past, because they're going to tell you things that you've forgotten, or tell your kids or your friend or someone a story about your past. Because when you tell that story, you're going to realize what you've gone through. And if you're trying to achieve a certain something, then make sure that you're looking for stories that apply to what you're trying to achieve.
And it's crazy how if you go, I like that, because if you go back to an experience you've had in the past, you're going to feel those emotions in your body.
Yeah.
You're going to feel that and then really reflect on that and see how you can maybe bring that lesson forward into 2025.
Yeah. Right.
Nice.
We want to keep it under 15 minutes. So I'm going to speak really quickly now and say thank you very much. I'm joking. Remember, Ubuntu, we are who we are through others. I'll work on me for you if you work on you for me. I will see you in the next episode.
Bye. Do you want to pause?